So 1, 2.
Down by the banks of my black river home, returning to my roots, never more to roam. Springfield, Vermont, bathe me in that black river, take me home. Hi everyone, welcome to episode 5 of Blue Diligence, a monthly show here on SAPA Television from the Springfield Democratic Town Committee. We're bringing Blue Diligence to you to help make connections between the citizens of Springfield, Windsor County, and our legislators up in Montpelier. We are committed to diligently highlighting Springfield Voices. An informed democracy is a strong democracy. I'm your host, Britton. Thank you so much for tuning in. We have a great show lined up for you today, so let's get ready to go. Last month, we interviewed Senator Dick McCormick, who is a member of the Senate Committee on Natural Resources and Energy. Senator McCormick helped us to better understand the Global Warming Solutions Act and what could happen if the state does not reach its emissions benchmarks for 2025. And as a longtime member and supporter of Act 250, the senator also discussed the original intent of Act 250 and the changes being proposed that could help address the housing shortage in Vermont. Today's guests are no strangers to Springfield. On our very first show, Representative Alice Emmons did a deep dive into some of the more important legislation from the 2023 legislative session. And on episode 2, Representative Kristi Morris discussed the connections between municipal, state, and federal government. With the 2024 legislative session half over, Representative Emmons and Morris are back on Blue Diligence to explain the crossover process to us and to tell us about some of the more important legislation that is crossing over. They'll give some perspective on the merits of the legislation and how it might impact us, if passed, into law. Alice, Kristi, thank you for coming back to Blue Diligence. We're so happy to have you on the show again.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thank you.
it.
Pleasure.
Thank you. So when you go back up to Montpelier, we just had our town meeting week. You'll go back up next week on Tuesday. You'll start the legislative crossover process. Now, I have to admit that when I did the research for this interview, I had to go and find out just exactly what that meant. And so when you have a bicameral legislature, a Senate, and a House, both of them are introducing legislation. And then eventually that piece of legislation needs to cross over. So I know I just gave a quick rundown of it, but why don't you give us a slightly more detailed rundown of it for our viewers?
What it really is how you manage our 16 to 18 week session to make sure that legislation is passing between the House and the Senate. So it's a logistical planning tool, which basically says by a certain date, usually halfway into the legislative session, any bills, legislation that you're working on has to be out of your committee and ready for action for the full House or the full Senate, so that allows the other body to have enough time to do its work, taking testimony and working on the version that came over. And then at the very end, those particular bills that cross over, they could not be changed and everything's in agreement. It goes off to the governor for signature. Or there could be some real differences, and then at that point there's a committee that's set up to work through compromises for that. So it's a technical term, and it's just to help the management and flow of legislation going through the House and the Senate to allow the other body time to review it.
And Kristi, we were talking about as well that the legislative biennium in Vermont, that I didn't realize this in getting ready for this interview, but I'm sure that some of our viewers don't as well, that all of our legislators and the governor are all on the same 2-year election clock, which really means that you're in the full court press right now before going into election. How does that affect the way that you're thinking about this coming up next few weeks?
It affects us in a way that we know that after crossover, when the bills swap chambers, the House bills go to the Senate and the Senate goes to the House, as Alice alluded to. We're getting down towards the end, so there'll be a crunch time to try to get the priorities in place of bills. And there can be, one bill can become a vehicle for another bill to be attached to as well. Right. Because as you start planning this calendar for a mid-May adjournment, we're running out of time. And it doesn't seem it right now. It seems like we would have plenty of time. Always boils down to the final month, and it's a scramble to try to get legislation approved.
And that final date is the end of May?
Yes, but I think, you know what Kristi just said, you think you have a lot of time, but if you look at our legislative schedule, our legislative calendar days, we're there 4 days a week. Right. So if you think, oh, we got a full month, no you don't. You have 16 days to do the work. So that's what you're doing. You're counting how many days from next Tuesday, March 12th, until about the middle of May, and how many days you're actually in session, which is 4 days a week. Those 4 days go by pretty fast.
Wow. And how many bills would you say are sort of floating around the legislature right now?
Well, we don't know.
Yeah.
Sure. So, for example, the House is approaching 900 bills in total. Now, we cannot possibly address all of them. So there's some that there's a ticket written for that, or a little post-it note, and it gets put up onto a bulletin board, and it's called On the Wall. And then it's up to leadership and the chairs, which Alice is the chair for her committee. Of course, hers is a little more defined because of the capital bills that she's working on to roll out. But the other chairs, under leadership, they look for these bills that are somewhat of a priority. They have to prioritize them. And then there are some legislators that will advocate for a bill that they started, and we really want to see that pushed through. So it does really become, I won't say helter-skelter, is probably not a correct term, but it does become a crunch time with the priorities that both the House and Senate and the individual members like to see to get their favorite bills across
the glorious messiness of democracy.
Well,
right?
What people often say, you don't want to watch laws being made because it's like sausage making. So you don't want to watch how sausages are made. But I think on average is anywhere from about 120 to 140 pieces of legislation that go through.
That are in play.
Yeah. Right. At any point in time, because some committees can pass out 20 or 30 bills, and other committees are only, like money committees, don't pass out that many bills because they're dealing more with the budget issues.
Well, speaking of which, why don't each of you tell us a little something about a piece of legislation that is really particularly interesting to you, or something that you feel you're going to do the full court press to get to. Alice, why don't we start with you?
Well, I'm going to focus in a little bit on my committee. We're a money committee that's dealing with bonded dollars for budgets, but we also have policy issues that deal with corrections, Department of Corrections. And we're working on a bill that really is trying to address when folks re-enter from an incarcerative setting back into the community, to provide more support for that person's, for twofold. For the person to be successful in their reentry, and for the community to be safer. So what we're looking at is to make sure that the person that is served their time is released, that they have a proper ID, because right now that's problematic. If you don't have an ID, it's really hard to get your medication. It's hard to get signed up for health care. It's hard to open up a bank account. So we're working to streamline that. We already have something in place, but we're working to streamline that. We're also working with the Department of Corrections and with their medical contractor to ensure that folks that are on medication, because many of our incarcerated folks are on a lot of medication. It could be cholesterol, it could be heart, it could be diabetes, the gamut, so that there's a continuity of them having their medication when they're reentering, because quite often what happens, because they don't have an ID, they can't pick up some of the medication either at the pharmacy or open up a bank account to have access to the money. We're also looking in terms of family visitation to folks who are incarcerated to make it more friendly for children and for the parent. We have that for the women who are incarcerated, but we're also looking at trying to provide that for the men. So that one is going to be a little more complicated, but this is a bill that my committee's been working on since about the end of January. And next week when we get back, we're pretty close to finishing it, and we hope to finish it
Well,
next
that
week.
sounds super important. What are the recidivism rates in Vermont?
Well, it runs around 30%, but it's a definition of recidivism,
Right.
which is a 3-year rolling average. So it runs around 30%. But the more support you can put around a person, be it housing, be it employment, and be it support for any treatment that they might need, they're going to be more successful, and your community is going to be safer.
Yeah.
So it's a two-prong approach.
Well, I'm really glad to hear about that. That sounds like a super important piece of legislation. And Kristi, how about you? What are you focused on?
Sure. So my committee, Environment and Energy, we passed out earlier a renewable energy standard, which just means your utility suppliers or electrical suppliers, of which there are 17 around the state. They are mandated right now to have 75% of their energy renewable. And there was a bill that we passed out to try to bump that up to 100% renewable. And that came out of a result of a summer study committee, and the utilities participated in that. And it seems like everyone is, I won't say everyone, but most people are in agreement that that's the direction that we're heading, and they think they can do it. And some of the smaller electrical suppliers are 100% renewable. So it has to be parsed out as to whether hydro is considered renewable, and there were some little hiccups with that. So it'll be off to the Senate eventually to see if they agree or have any corrections, like Alice alluded to earlier.
Yeah.
So the big bill that we've been working on is H687, and that is it's an Act 250 enhancement or amendment, if you will. Now, Act 250 is what guides development in the state of Vermont. So it protects our natural resources, waters. It has to account for wastewater and water supply, transportation, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of things that Act 250 has done for Vermont since 1973. And within that 50 years, there is the perception, and perhaps it may be true, that Act 250 permitting to get development started can be an obstruction as well as an enhancement for getting the development done. It all boils down to a set of rules or criteria, they call it. And so a development has to meet the rules or this criteria. It has to be considered. Doesn't mean you can't get development, but if you don't meet all of the check the boxes off of the criteria, you might not get your permit. So in this housing crunch time that we're in, Act 250 is seen as maybe a detriment or a hindrance to getting more housing done. So this bill, is broken down into three components, but specifically a full natural resource board, professional board, if I can say that. Right now we have one chair or one director, and then there's another person that assists, but it's on a temporary basis right now. It expires by 26. So we're looking at standing up a full-time professional board, which the governor has alluded to in the past, to try to get more consistency and education into our regional or county-wide, or it's not really county, but our regional commissions who issue the permits, or at least receive the applications, and then either issue the permit, or there could be an appeal if it's denied, and that would go back to the Natural Resource Board, professional board, if we stand this up, and they'll review that. Currently, it goes to the environmental court. It goes to the Supreme Court for that analysis and for that appeal to see whether it's going to be allowed or not. So this bill is trying to loosen up some of that guidelines, but still have to qualify under the criteria that's going to be listed. And we've added a new one, which is forest blocks, or forest, which is not in the current one necessarily. So we've defined forest and critical habitat areas where wildlife can move within forest, and we don't want to eliminate deer yards, and those. It has to be considered. Doesn't mean you can't. It just means it has to be considered. And is there a way to avoid it? Is there a way to minimize it? Or is there a way to mitigate by conserving area elsewhere? It's really pretty complicated, but it's setting up a professional board, having the regional planning commissions develop land use planning maps. And those maps will predefine areas that are either sensitive for environmental issues or to our natural resources. And it's going to define where we want development and where we don't want development. And and where we want development, we're going to tier that into 3 tiers. And if you're in a tier 1A or 1B, which is very close, it means you have local planning, water, sewer, those types of issues, local planning control. And so there's no sense in getting a duplicate permit from the state. So we're looking at relaxing some of that NRB permitting because we have local permitting.
It's fantastic.
It's been interesting, and I'm sure, and not without controversy.
Of course.
Anytime we're looking at changing Act 250 or. And certainly the appeal process is where a lot of people believe, a lot of developers believe that the appeal process is cumbersome. When you break it down, it's really not. You just have to meet the criteria. And there can be fees that go into that for either mitigation if you're going to conserve land elsewhere, or the application process based off from the cost of the development. So it's really a simple process, but we're just trying to massage it a little bit so that it's more user-friendly.
Of course, and there's always competing priorities for everybody, right? Well, thank you both so much again for coming back to see us on Blue Diligence. Best of luck in the upcoming weeks, and thank you for your work for Springfield and for the state of Vermont as well.
Thank you. We really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. We come back anytime if we can find the time and the opportunity. Absolutely.
Done deal. We'll take you up on it.
Please do. Thank you.
Up next, Springfield Voices, where we take the time to highlight the people and events that shape our unique town. A large part of downtown Springfield consists of apartment buildings managed by the Springfield Housing Authority. They total 155 apartment units in 5 different buildings. Indeed, the Huber and Whitcomb buildings have a commanding physical presence in our town. What's it like to live in these apartments? Today, we are going to discover a little bit about living in the Whitcomb building from 2 of its residents as they share their unique Springfield voices. Now I will pass it on to Char Osterlund, who is with Mimi Yahn and Kim Greenwood in the SAPA TV studio.
Hi everyone, I'm Char Osterlund. Welcome to Springfield Voices. Our guests today are Mimi Yahn and Kim Greenwood, who live in the Whitcomb Building apartments. Hi Mimi. Hi Kim.
Hi.
Welcome and thank you for coming on the show to share your voices.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you. Now when I first talked to you, I mentioned that I'm a people person and that downtown I was always intrigued by the Whitcomb and Huber buildings because they just seem so big and like all those people. And I've never met them and I don't know what the apartments are like. So maybe you can help me out a little bit and tell me some things. First of all, what's it like in the Whitcomb building? Either one of you can.
It's a very home-like atmosphere, especially the Whitcomb building. When I first walked in, it just felt very welcoming, and there's a lot of activities that you can join or you don't. You know, we have things like potlucks at the end of every month, every Friday. We have bingo. And it's just a really relaxed atmosphere, and everybody helps their neighbors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good.
It's an enjoyable place to live.
Yeah. And how long have you lived there in the building?
I've lived there close to 5 years.
Nice.
I started out the Huber building.
And Mimi, how about you? How long ago did you move
5
in?
years, just about 5 years, yeah.
Oh, good. And
Yeah.
did you have the same experience?
I did, yeah. The first time I came in, I just knew, oh, yes, this is a wonderful, it was a warm feeling, and felt like there was community here. And it's very Vermont to me, because, you know, the culture of Vermont is that there's a community and people help each other out. And, you know, I'm from New York originally, and, you know, you didn't even know who your next door neighbor was. It was just this is the complete opposite of it, you know. And like Kim says, there's a lot of events that you can do or not do. But what really amazes me too is how much people will pitch in to help each other out. I mean, when people get sick, there's always at least a few people who will look after you, who will, you know, if you need, there's a lot of people who don't have transportation, they don't have cars. There's always people regularly, they go to, you know, wherever they need to go shopping. You can always find people, someone will always offer to take you shopping, go to the pharmacy, whatever it is that you need. It's really, yeah, or take you to doctor's appointments. I mean, I've known a number of times where something happened in the middle of the night, because, you know, we're basically an older population for the most part. Things happen. And in the middle of the night, there's someone who will drive you to the hospital if need be. You don't have to call the ambulance, although that's available too. But it's also, it's kind of weird because it's this big building, you know, in a small town. So there's like this weird blend of small town, almost rural Vermont, but then there's this big city look to it, you know, because, whoa, 2 high-rises, you know. I was like, whoa, that's kind of weird, you know. But so it's, yeah, but it works. And, you know, I happen to really like the Whitcomb, the location of it. It's not right in downtown, but there's the river there. It's just really beautiful. And one of the reasons that I wanted to live there too was to be able to walk to the library, to, you know, wherever. I mean, just all the stuff happening right in the downtown area. So it's just really perfect for me.
Yeah.
It reminds me of a community within a community.
Yeah.
You know, and like she said, with the river, my apartment is on the first floor. I overlook the river, and it's so enjoyable to go out to my little porch and sit out there and have coffee in the morning and watch the wildlife that comes through, you know, and the people and the, yeah.
Yeah, that is a unique combination,
Yeah.
because as Mimi said, it looks like, you know, it's a large apartment, at least by Vermont standards.
Yeah.
And yet right out the window, there's a stream, and you
Yeah.
Yeah.
see the wildlife.
Nice.
So it's really lucky. Now, Kim, you said, I think one of you said that communication, you always know if somebody needs help. How does that system work? Is it an informal system, or?
Yeah, I don't actually. Well, I think most folks are connected on Facebook. I know that I'm actually not, but yeah, I've often wondered how did they know? I don't know. I'm just.
You know, it's kind of like you get used to seeing certain people certain times a day, okay? And if you don't see them for whatever reason, we need to check on this person.
Right, they have their routines.
Yeah.
This all really came into play, especially with COVID. Like if somebody had COVID, you know, there was people helping out, dropping food off. Do you need mail? Do you need anything?
Yeah.
And it just is word of mouth or Facebook, you know, is a good tool.
Now, in a community like that, sometimes things can go wrong, or, I don't know, do things go wrong, and is there some kind of an organization within the apartment that addresses governance or taking care of folks?
As far as, like, if there's any problems within certain people, the housing authority is the one to call. But as far as events and planning, and there is a tenants association within the building. They kind of keep track and plan all the events and the dinners, and there's a fund, you know, that we use for different things. And there's like Saturday morning breakfast, coffee hour, for example. That fund can buy, you know, plates, cups, silverware, you know, things like that, half and half for the coffee, you know. As far as personal problems, that would be the housing authority, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So more like events.
Yes.
And planning the community things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, do you have people that step forward to be on this, in this association, or because I know in town there are a lot of committees that aren't fully, don't have all the members because sometimes it's just difficult to get volunteers.
It is difficult to get volunteers. There's a couple of people that have been on there for many years. I'm currently the president of the Tenants Association. I did it for a couple of years, and then I decided to take a break to focus on living my life, and then I was nominated again this year, so I got voted in. Mimi's been on the board.
Yeah.
So there's a president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and assistant treasurer.
So you do have all the positions filled.
We do have all the positions filled now, yes.
And do people attend the meetings, or are they pretty active?
I've seen a trend where the last couple of meetings that there have been more people attending.
Oh, good.
There's times, around holidays they're pretty scarce, but we always encourage people, if you want to know what's going on, if you have a voice, you want to have a voice, and come to the meetings. Once a month for not even a half an hour sometimes. So
That's
doesn't
seems
seem too
doable.
much.
That's good. So the Whitcomb building, as we said, it is a large building, has a physical presence. As you approach the downtown. As a resident there, do you feel, you said you have community, how about your connection to the town of Springfield? Do you feel like you're connected to the town?
Yeah, I feel more connected to the town than I did when I didn't live in I lived elsewhere in Springfield. It's kind of slow. It's like it's still evolving. I used to live near Putney, and there was a really stronger sense of community there. No matter where you went, you could take all day just to do a few errands because of all the people you run into, and that is starting to happen a little more in Springfield, but it still feels like Springfield itself isn't quite as strong a community as some other places. Stronger certainly than other places I've lived, but there's this sort of transition that it feels like it's going through. Folks who have been here all their life or most of their life, and new people coming in, like me, and just sort of figuring out what are we going to be. It does feel like we're transitioning to something different, and I don't know. I mean, I'm feeling more and more, even after I've been here for probably 7 or 8 years, I think, and I am feeling more and more like I'm really finding community, and don't feel like I have to go elsewhere to find community.
I'm on the other end of the spectrum where I've been here all my life, so I do feel at the Whitcomb building that a sense of being attached to the community, being in with it. It all depends on how you want to put yourself forward.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There are people that just like to stay to themselves, and that's fine, but getting out, if you want to be a part of it, and get out and do it. And there's so many connections as far as newspapers and different people that come to the building, HCRS, whatever, can get you into that. So it depends on the person.
Yeah.
So what you put into it is what you'll get out of it.
Yeah. At the same time, I mean, there's certain things that I do miss. For my own self personally, I would like to find, a larger LGBT community, and so I have to go elsewhere for that. I think that's probably one of the bigger things. And I don't know, I like to go dancing, so I wind up going to Bellows Falls for that. But like I said, I'm still finding, definitely I feel that my community is at the Whitcomb. You know, I feel like I'm home. From the moment I walked in, it's like, oh my God, I'm home. Which was weird for me because I thought, you know, my ideal place is back in the woods on a dirt road and, you know, quiet in the middle. And it's like, what, in town, you know? Just, you know. But no, this is definitely my home. It's just some of the larger community, I'm not quite, you know, it's not quite there yet for me anyway. And certainly I hope there'll be a larger LGBT community at some point. That will be, yay!
Yeah, I think they actually had a few events. They had a Speak Out 2 years ago in June. Well, I don't know if you attended that.
Wasn't able to, no.
Yeah,
no,
and then they had one again last year that wasn't as well attended, but it was a lot of fun. People read from a book.
Yeah.
And so there are efforts in town to do that.
I know, which, and that's up to me to, you know, be part of that and to maybe even help, you know, push it along or, you know, keep it going, but yeah. So I think the library has had a lot to do with helping that along. I love our library. I mean, they have done wonderful things, and you know, Sue and the rest of them, they're really, wow, lovely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So Kim, are there any particular events that would bring you out and make you go put in the effort to be part of the larger community?
For me personally, I like the music events. I'm a music person. I do attend like the board meetings online. I'm not one that is good in a crowd, but I used, back when I was a kid, I remember the Moonlight Madnesses and that was a big community event, and unfortunately we don't have those things anymore, but I would like to see something similar come back. It was just, you know, everybody went down, whether you were going to shop or not, but everybody knew everybody, you know what I mean? Alumni parades, same thing, you know.
Yeah, the alumni parades are rather interesting. I moved here from the northern part of the state, and they didn't have the alumni parades. I think it's a Southern Vermont thing.
Yeah, yeah.
which I found intriguing.
Yeah, it does bring out a lot of people from the community, and like I said, you walk down the street and you know everybody. Not so much anymore, but a lot of people you know, and you get to meet people too. So you know, I think it's a great event.
Yeah, Springfield on the Move, I know last summer, and I think they're doing it again this summer, had the music events.
Yeah.
And I guess July 13th, there's a big fest planned for Springfield. I don't know what is going to be included, but it sounds like it's going to be a pretty big thing.
Yeah, when I first moved here, there were the street, you know, they closed off the downtown area for this big, you know, festival kind of thing, and I really missed that. That was absolutely wonderful. That was a real draw for me. It was just
I personally would like to see them include not only local artists, but all genres too, not just one type of music.
I'm actually gonna interject to just say that the Street Fest, which is what you're talking about, this year will now also include the film festival that we're starting up. So
and you're part of that. You're the one that's starting that.
Coordinating it, and we're going to get a hopefully, you know, critical mass for both events. And where this year Springfield on the Move will be shutting down that whole street, just like you remember.
Yay! Oh, wonderful.
Good. Okay, so over the past few years, a lot of changes have been made to the downtown. And since you are pretty prominent, at the entrance to downtown, have they had an impact on you? Do you like them? Do you wish somebody had asked for your opinion before? This is a short answer.
I don't know if I don't feel that it has had much of an impact on me. There is one thing I did want to bring up, though, when you talked about, you know, people stepping up and volunteering, and I think that's been a trend everywhere, not just in Springfield or Vermont. But what I would really love to see is an intergenerational kind of thing. And I think that if the city leaders could be more involved in that, in helping create more of an, events and programs where you have like school kids working with older people, just because I think the whole concept of volunteering, I think that was part of what I missed a lot when I left the Putney area, because it's just part of the everyday life. People, nearly everybody volunteers doing something at some point, and you get to meet people, and it creates a stronger community. And kids are involved in that too. It's like not just as a once a year kind of thing, but as an ongoing kind of thing. It creates a different culture and a different, stronger community in every way. And certainly for seniors, it is incredibly beneficial, because then it grows into things like helping seniors with shopping or with many different things.
Community is about connections, I think. And that's a very good point to make.
Volunteering is about opening your heart and your life to, be part of that community. And I would really love to see initiatives focused on that rather than structural things and buildings and, or trying to bring in things that may or may not be feasible or even right for Springfield. Yeah.
Do you have anything to add to that, Ken?
Going back to your question about the changes, I do have to hand it to Springfield on the Move and trying to get, different changes going. For as far as our building, I would like to see, maybe like a little cafe or something that our residents can access, that's not so expensive, because a lot of our residents are, on a certain income, and, it's hard for them to go to the more expensive places. Right. And we do have the bus, which is a decent transportation, but maybe, even going back to volunteering, maybe a volunteer service where they volunteer to drive people to whatever, the plaza or whatever.
Okay. So we have some themes here, and it sounds like Springfield on the Move deserves a lot of credit.
Definitely.
Yes,
Yeah.
they certainly do.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate
thank
you
you
being
for
on the
having
show.
us.
Thank you.
A big thanks to Representatives Emmons and Morris, Mimi Yahn, and Kim Greenwood for being on our show today. And thank you so much for tuning in to Blue Diligence. The Springfield Democratic Town Committee is committed to connecting Springfield Voices. We want to thank the terrific staff here at Springfield Area Public Access for all their support in getting our show on the air. Thanks also to our musicians and graphic designer. If you'd like to reach out to us, we'd love to hear from you. You can send emails to springfield.vtdems@gmail.com. You can find our Instagram at Springfield_VT_Dems. We would love to get your questions, comments, or criticisms. Seriously, we can take it. And who knows, we may even read your message on a future episode. Thanks again for joining us, and remember, stay diligent. Our democracy might just depend on it.
1, 2.
Down by the banks of my black river home, returning to my roots, never more